Welcome to the Giants 100 Players presented by Bud Light. I'm Bob Papa, joined by Judy Battista, longtime NFL reporter covering the National Football League, NFL media. And Judy, you were part of this blue ribbon panel of 13 to cull down the list of over the 5,000 players to wear a Giants uniform since 1925 to zero in on the top 100. And it was an exhaustive process, but it was a fun process to really understand the history of the franchise.
It was awesome because, first of all, I went down the rabbit hole on YouTube videos and in reference books, so that took up a whole lot of days just doing research. But it was hard. I think the hardest part, the most challenging part, was comparing players across eras of football. But it was a great walk down memory lane for a fan.
Yeah, and it's a fun countdown in this top 100. So in this episode, we're going to discuss positions 91 through 100. And at 91 is Lawrence Tynes, and at 100 is Richie Seubert. And Lawrence, I'll start with you. You know, when you think about the magnitude of this franchise and you think of players that have played here, what was your initial reaction to finding out that you were one of the top 100 of all time?
It was humbling, emotional. You think about your career all in one little 30-second snap, and hung up the phone, talked to my wife. I'm like, I just got named top 100 players in Giants franchise history. It's humbling. I'm getting a little emotional right now thinking about it, but undrafted, walk on, come to this iconic franchise, play with great players, great teammates. I was fortunate to be on great teams with great players, but humbling is the word that this comes to mind. I mean, there's been so many great players and great men wear this uniform.
Richie, like Lawrence, undrafted, made it as a free agent, went through all of your trials and tribulations. Your feelings and emotions when you found out that you had made this list?
When you called me, Bob, I thought you were joking at first. The tradition here with the New York Football Giants and being part of the top 100, I think being the 100th pick is probably the hardest one to be. So it's an honor to me and my family. 10 seasons with the New York Football Giants. This place is pretty much my home, so it's pretty special.
Your career obviously is one of perseverance because it looked like your career might end prematurely because of an injury. What inspired you to fight through all of that to go on to become a two-time Super Bowl champion?
My teammates, right? My coaches, the training staff, Ronnie Barnes and Byron Hansen and Steve and those guys, they never gave up on me, and they kept pushing me to come back, and I really had nothing else to fall back onto, so I had to find a way to make it back on that football team. Mr. Mara, right, gave me a second chance to play for the New York Giants again, and the coaches, and it was tough, but I'm glad I did it because Super Bowl 42 was a special moment.
17-14 is the final, okay? 17-14, fellas. One touchdown, we are world champions. Believe it, and it will happen.
When you walked away, did you think you had anything left? Was there any sort of sense of what if I hadn't had all those injuries?
Yeah, for a few years. I look back on it now, and I don't look at it like that anymore, but I said, what if I never made it back from breaking my leg? I probably would be running my parents' restaurant back in Wisconsin that they sold a few years ago. So I'm glad I'm still living in New Jersey, coaching high school football. I'm glad I got to play for another 6-7 years after that injury, and there's nothing better, right? If you love the game of football, why wouldn't you give it everything you have to make it back?
What about Lawrence as a teammate?
Lawrence was awesome. I know he's just a kicker, but
That's right.
right, Lawrence. No offense.
I get it.
He was awesome, right? The kick he made in Green Bay.
All right, here goes Tynes again from 47 yards to kick the Giants to the Super Bowl. Snap is good. Kick on its way. End over end. Does it have the distance? It is good! Lawrence Tynes has kicked the Giants to the Super Bowl. And the New York Giants are going to Super Bowl 42 in overtime. They beat the Packers 23-20.
I got the picture of it in my basement, right? So teammates, he said it before, our locker room was pretty special. People always ask me what separated different teams I played on and the good teams compared to the not so well seasons. And it's the guys in the locker room. I think if you get together, you love each other, you play for each other, it makes a difference. We had a lot of fun, but we got a lot of work done too.
What about him as a teammate?
He's the best. You guys, everyone knows Richie Seubert, right? That whole offensive line, you know, it's funny. As you get older, people say, what was so special about those teams? And it's a simple answer. Our locker room was just different. Still to this day, I know his family, I know all my teammates' families and their kids. When you have that bond amongst, 61 guys, 53 plus the practice squad, like our practice squad guys we're pretty tight with. I mean, that's how special the group was. And he was leader of the pack, right? We all knew his story, the adversity he fought through to come back. And the offensive line is kind of the glue of the team, right? They just had so many great personalities, great players, just the best. And I could say that for 50 other guys that were on our team. We were so close, and that to me, when it's crunch time, that's the difference. I mean, that's the difference in wins and losses. Can you trust the guy next to you? And we could always trust that guy.
That 2007 team, I look back on it and think there was like a little bit of magic with that team. Tom Coughlin was, had sort of had to go through this come to Jesus conversation, little opening up of his personality. There was some strife, there was some drama early in the season, didn't get off to the best start. And then you're the wild card team and you play all out against the Patriots in that regular season finale that has nothing on the line except pride. And I remember talking to John Mara before the Super Bowl about that game, because you were going to play the Patriots again, and he said that on the field before that game, he was talking to Bill Belichick, and Belichick said as they were shaking hands and about to leave each other, Belichick said, well, I hope we see you again. And John Mara's thinking to himself, well, you're undefeated. You're going to the Super Bowl. I don't know about us. And then, of course, you go on this sort of magic ride, including the game in Green Bay, and then the huge upset in the Super Bowl. So I always think that team, more than any of the other Giant Super Bowl teams, had a little bit of something extra that you just can't quite put your finger on, but it was there.
Do you guys feel it? Especially the whole Road Warriors thing?
Something clicked, right? We loved going on the road together. We loved playing for each other. We didn't want to let each other down. We knew we had something special. We just had to keep winning to win it.
You had the 2 overtime kicks in each of the Super Bowl runs. Which was the harder kick?
Oh, man.
Because the conditions were dreadful.
The Green Bay.
Right.
Yeah, because of, missing twice, making twice, missing at the end of regulation. Thank God for Corey Webster. My God, I owe him so much. The defense just made a nice play, but 47 yards in that weather, I don't know that I could have made it. If you line me up 10 more times, I don't know if I would have made any of them. I just happened to make it that time.
It's still the longest kick,
which is crazy,
ever made in Lambeau Field in that direction.
In the playoffs.
In the playoffs.
Yeah, and I keep waiting for it to get broken. And I'll be honest with you, when I watch playoff games, I'm like, can we just move this up a little bit? Because there's been some guys kick it, they just haven't made them.
Right.
But yeah, that was really difficult just because of the pressure I put on myself by missing. But still, I still say it's the best day I've had kicking in my life because the conditions were miserable.
Let's talk about some other guys on this list. He was a teammate of yours. He comes in at number 97, Akeem Nicks.
Unbelievable.
Who, by the way, in Green Bay, 4 years later in the divisional playoff round when they were the number 1 seed, catches the Hail Mary at the end of the half, but was dominant. But that was the year of Victor Cruz, right?
Yeah.
But Akeem Nicks' postseason numbers stood until recently, and his performance against the Falcons, his performance, throughout that postseason was incredible.
Hakeem was, as you guys know, kind of low-key, quiet. When I think of Hakeem, I just think how cool he was. He was just so cool. Like, he's just a cool customer. And he broke out in that playoff game. I mean, he was always a great player. But I remember vividly him taking that one 70, 80 yards against the Falcons.
Nicks wide open at the 40. 45, runs through a tackle. There goes Nicks, gallops over another. He's going to score. 20, 10, 5, touchdown Giants. 72 yards.
And he's doing the icky shuffle or the dirty bird.
And then obviously the Hail Mary, which was a massive play. We were just really going to try and run the clock out against the Packers. So that was a massive play. I didn't expect it. I was thinking maybe we'll get a few yards here and kick a field goal, maybe try a long kick, but that was a huge touchdown.
6 seconds to go. Manning back, steps up, heaves one down the middle of the field into the end zone, and Nicks makes the catch for the touchdown. He went up with the big hands and caught it on the Hail Mary on the final play of the half.
My favorite picture from that year, that era of Giants football, is that picture of Victor, Hakeem, and Manningham walking off the field in San Francisco. I have it in my house. I think it's one of the coolest pictures in Giants history. It's just their backs and they're walking towards the sideline. I mean, those were three dudes. So I'm a big fan of Hakeem Nicks.
And when you talk about those three, I believe the records, it still stands. Hakeem, I think, still has the second most postseason receiving yards in NFL history.
Yeah.
I think that stands second only to Larry Fitzgerald for that run.
For the run.
2011. So when you see that picture of those three, and it was the year of Victor, certainly. Like, it's really Hakeem that had the numbers that year.
Hakeem was your teammate as well. He came in 2009 as a rookie. What did you think when he came into that locker room, and what was it like getting to know him?
You knew that he had it, right? Like Tyne said, he was very calm, collective. He was cool. He was a receiver. When receivers come in, every offensive lineman wants to be a wide receiver at one time in their life, catch a football, right, score a touchdown. But he fit right into that locker room, right? He came over and he talked to us as offensive linemen. Like he was one of us. He was a good player, and I'm glad he was on our team.
You know, the Giants, the tradition that they have, and we've talked about it, whether it's DBs or linebackers or defensive linemen, offensive linemen, there's a great thread because the franchise history has always been predicated on the run game. Number 99, Brad Benson. Part of that Super Bowl 21 team. They were a run team as well, and the offensive line was greater than the sum of its parts in 1986, the Suburbanites. You guys were kind of the same way, right?
I would say so, right? We were five guys that worked well together, just like they were. Obviously, I knew who Brad Benson is, and I met him a couple times, and great football player, great person. We were very similar, right? We never had a name like the Suburbanites, but we played well together just like they did.
One of the things about that group, they were undersized even by league standards in '86, but it was sort of the harmony that they brought together, which was similar to these groups.
He played multiple positions on the offensive line in his career, right? And then I think maybe the game he is best known for and deserves to be best known for is in the Super Bowl run. He basically canceled out Dexter Manley in a late season game against Washington. At the time, Dexter Manley was leading the league in sacks, not Lawrence. And so I am always amazed when offensive linemen play multiple positions in the NFL. Like, to me, that's just mind-boggling that you can start at multiple positions in the NFL, and that's what he did.
Yeah, 1986, the Giants had already beaten Washington in Giant Stadium, so this game is at the old RFK. If they win this game, they guarantee themselves the NFC East. And that's the famous game with Brad Benson where his nose was bleeding, and the Giants went down there and pretty much stuck it to Washington and closed things out and finished the regular season 14-2. Judy, number 95 on this list is a really interesting name because neither of these guys played with him, but they both watched him. Share with them number 95.
Saquon Barkley. This was, I think, for those of us who were on the panel, this was a really hard one to gauge what you do with a mid-career player who was so dynamic when he was healthy. Obviously, his rookie season was just spectacular. But again, you're weighing where is he in his career? What's he going to do going forward after this? Obviously, he's going to do it for another team now. But he is on the list because, in my mind, so often he was the offense when he was on the field. He was the engine of the team. But again, this was a tough one. We talked about comparing players from previous years. This was really hard to place a mid-career player who you think has just so much further to go.
Yeah, I've covered him a little bit doing some podcast work for the Post. You know, injuries don't always come first to mind when I think of Saquon. I just think about how classy he was. He was just always so classy and humble. I'll remember that, and obviously the playmaking ability was next level. Like that rookie year, like you mentioned, was unreal. You know, he did have the ACL and then some things caught up to him. I still think he's a good player, but obviously wish him the best of luck. But he was a great Giant. I mean, he had to be on this list. You can say what you want about where he's playing right now, but classy human being, did everything the right way, and was a really good player.
Yeah, I mean, when you win the AP Offensive Rookie of the Year and you rewrite the Giants record books in your time here, and the other thing that goes into it, which is why, you know, he's worthy to be in this top 100 and was very emotional when I spoke to him about it, nearly broke down in tears. It was after he had already left the team. but to be recognized in this great franchise really meant a lot to him. And at the end of the day, right, part of making this list is, did other teams have to game plan for you? And they certainly had to game plan for Saquon Barkley.
Great player, right? Best of luck to him, except for the couple times a year we play him. What he did here with New York, he deserves to be on the list. And I look at it as, if I'm 100, he's 96. We're not too far away, right?
He's 95.
95, sir. Right? People don't game plan for me.
Darrell Dess comes in at number 92. So we'll do a little history. Here's a guy that played left guard, Pro Bowler, during that great run of Giants teams that were going to championship games. He was part of that offense. You know, people always think of the Giants defensively, but in the early 60s with Y.A. Tittle, their greatest strength was offense. They averaged 32
and those
points
numbers
a game.
still stand. They still hold the franchise scoring record.
Wow.
Yeah, in 1963, the year Tittle was throwing 36 touchdown passes, that record stood until Dan Marino in 1984. You know, 32 points a game for that Giant offense in 1963. A little different style than the way you guys played it, but, you know, that tradition. Did you feel as an offensive lineman, and not knowing some of these guys from yesteryear, that there was a certain standard and tradition that you guys were in charge of trying to uphold for the franchise?
I think there was a toughness about us, right? I think you had to be tough to be an offensive lineman for the New York Football Giants. I think our coaches, Coach McNally, Coach Flaherty, instilled that in us, the tradition that was here. You had to be tough, you had to be physical, you had to be smart. I think that's kind of what we all were from back then till now.
Going back to the 86 team, Judy, at number 93 is Terry Kennard. Part of that Giant defense that won Super Bowl 21. Played a long time for the New York Giants, was a Pro Bowler. You know, when you think about the secondary players for those teams, sometimes they go a little bit unnoticed because of, you know, George Martin and Leonard Marshall and Jim Burt, and then Lawrence Taylor, Carl Banks, Harry Carson, Gary Reasons, you know, and all those great players. But, you know, the secondary of those teams were kind of unsung heroes.
They were, and the defensive front was murdering quarterbacks, and they were feeding off it. And again, I find it amazing that he had enough interceptions that he's still that high on the Giants' all-time list of interceptions. You would think that in the succeeding, you know, however many years, it's been now 40 years, that as the game has gone so pass-heavy, that somebody would have climbed over him.
Another player comes in at number 94, Eric Howard. This is a guy that has one of the most defining plays in the history of the franchise. The 1990 NFC Championship game, the Niners are going for a three-peat. Candlestick Park, Roger Craig never fumbles. The Giants need a turnover, so Matt Barr can kick that iconic field goal like you kicked two of them to get the Giants to the Super Bowl. And it's Eric Howard who gets his hand, his fist, and his helmet in there to force the fumble that Lawrence Taylor recovered, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Mm-hmm.
I love when it's players that you don't think about who make the play, and the fact that, you know, he shared that job with Jim Burt, and then he took over that job, and the fact that it's him who makes the play, and then obviously Lawrence recovers. I love when that happens, when it's an unsung player who makes the play that saves the season.
And he's part of that brilliant George Young drafting period. When you look at 1984, and Carl Banks is the third overall pick, and then Eric Howard is part of that 86 class, and Pepper Johnson, and all those guys that are coming in 84, 85, 86, kind of laying the foundation for these historic teams.
What George Young was so good at, I think, is he just kept replenishing the machine, right? Like he would just keep building, and so there was. There's not what you see so often with teams, which is, you know, going up and then going down and going up and going down, right? He just kept feeding the beast with more and more players and putting them in so that there was a bridge and it kept going.
Well, there's always a player, right? At some point, like if you think about our Niners NFC Championship, the special teams turnovers were massive. Jaquan Williams makes a couple plays and puts us in position, but you know, the one story in Giants history that no one really talks about, I think is one of the coolest things, is me and Zach Diossi talk about this all the time, is that Zach Diossi snapped a game-winning field goal in Candlestick to a kicker wearing number 9 for the New York Giants, as his father did, at the same stadium in the same upright.
Snap, spot, kick is away, it's got the distance, it is good! Good!
And the Giants are going to Tampa Bay. It's over for the three-peats. It's over.
It's really cool. Yeah.
Good history.
Same
Got
upright.
to be somewhere in Giants
amazing.
100.
It's got to be. It's got to be. The Yassi's, both of them. I wanted to make sure we mentioned Zach, but just that is so cool to me that his father and him have that moment at Candlestick at the same upright, and two guys wearing number 9 kicking an NFC Championship game-winning field goal. Pretty cool.
Willie Williams comes in at number 96. He's another player that, played in that era when the Giants weren't very good, but he was one of these bright lights. 4th in franchise history as far as interceptions are concerned, and he had 35 interceptions during the course of his career. I'm happy he was recognized by the voters, because a lot of times when guys don't play on winning teams or play in those darker eras, they kind of get forgotten by history. But he was a fantastic player for the Giants.
Right, and I think what gets him on the list and what got the panel's attention is the 35 interceptions, again, in the mid-'60s, at a time when the ball was still not being thrown all over the field the way it is now. And so that number really stands out. And again, the fact that he's still, 60 years later, that number is still that high up on the interception list, that's what gets your attention.
Think about this. In 1968, he had 10 interceptions. It's the last time a Giants defensive player has had double-digit interceptions in a season.
Right.
Wow.
Incredible.
Coming in at number 98, Eddie Price. So he was in the Navy,
Love the story.
World War II, and played in the SEC at Tulane. And this is another one of these guys that can't tell the history of the franchise without talking about Eddie Price and what his whole journey is so unique.
So he played in the 1950s, obviously, after the war, and he ran for more than 100 yards in 3 games, and that was a franchise record that stood until Saquon broke it. So,
Oh, wow.
right, I mean, that's the span of time. Again, this is a player that you're not familiar with him, but numbers like that just stand out to you, and you think, like, you got to find a place on the list for a player like this. Just an incredible record there.
Yeah, I mean, he averaged 6 yards a carry during the course of his career. He went to Pro Bowls in 1951, 52, and 54. And he held the single game record for rushing yards, too, for the Giants. And had these phenomenal games. And I think there was one season where he rushed for more yards than teams in the league.
Which is nuts.
So that's how dominant he was. And again, that's part of this whole exercise. Richie, I'm going to circle back to you with this. The Giants, once a Giant, always a Giant. I know it has special significance. You were around to experience Mr. Mara and that phrase that he coined. As you reflect upon it, especially after your retirement, what did Mr. Mara mean to you and that phrase as you got to live it?
Mr. Mara was an awesome man. I broke my leg in 2003. He used to come visit me in the hospital. When people were telling me I was probably done playing, Mr. Mara told me to work hard and I'll find a way back on that field. Just by him being there, right, it meant a lot to me. I think once a Giant, always a Giant. I never wanted to go play anywhere else, so I was lucky enough to be a Giant my entire career. Me being in that hospital for 20 days and him coming to see me, it gave me the opportunity actually to see what kind of man he was. And he didn't have to do that, right? Being the owner of a franchise, you don't have to stop at the hospital to see a player that was, there 3 years and pretty much out the door probably if I didn't come back. But he gave me hope. He gave me a chance. Awesome family, obviously. Awesome man. And once a Giant, always a Giant. It was my life, right? Like, I still come back to this day. I see you. I see the guys in the facility. I see the guys upstairs and the women upstairs. It's a special place, and I'm grateful to be a Giant. So,
Lawrence, obviously the Mara family and the Tisch family in both of your playing eras so influential. What does that all mean to you about once a Giant, always a Giant?
It's a brotherhood. I mean, there's guys I didn't play with that obviously Mark Collins lives in Kansas City. I see him quite a bit at charity outings. It's pretty cool to see all 4 Super Bowl rings in one little place in Kansas. But I never met Mark Collins, never played with him until 4 or 5 years ago. And I felt like I knew him instantly because we wore this helmet. And the same thing goes from when the old guys would come back. There's just an instant connection, especially with all the teams that won Super Bowls. The Giants did a lot for being my family, just the franchise itself. But it's funny, I live in Kansas City. We know they got a good football team, and I played there. But there's only one team I'll think about and support the rest of my life is the Giants. So it's a brotherhood. That's what once a Giant, always a Giant means.
I got to ask, how often do you wear that ring?
Not very often.
Just special occasions?
Special occasions, which today is. Once in a blue moon, I'll take it out of the safe and put it on and smile.
How often do you wear yours?
Just events, like I wore them last year, obviously, when I did the draft pick in Kansas City. That was a lot of fun. Humbled to be asked to do that. That was cool. So I wore both of them. I felt pretty cool. To have two is insane. So, yeah, I don't wear them very often.
Judy, I want to thank you for being a part of this process, not only the taping of this show, but also all the hard work that you put in coming to this final number, which obviously was very difficult to come to.
It was, but a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Lawrence, congratulations.
Thank you.
On
Appreciate
your
it.
spot. And Richie, congratulations on your spot.
Thank you.
Being voted the top 100 players in the history of this storied franchise. I encourage everybody to follow the Giants on all their social media platforms as the countdown is underway, as we're taking a look at the top 100 players in the history of the New York Football Giants. So for Judy Battista, Lawrence Tynes, Richie Soybert, I'm Bob Papa. Thanks for joining us for the Giants Top 100 Players, presented by Bud Light.